Should we just start?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch break and had some good networking. And just to let you know, you should be in the room where we're going to be talking about local air energy planning. So I hope I've got the right audience. If that's not what you're expecting to talk about, I won't be offended if you leave. Welcome. Come in, come and take a seat. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Cheryl Hiles. I'm Director of Energy Capital, which is a place-based partnership focusing on smart energy based in the West Midlands Combined Authority. I'm delighted to be here today. I've spent about 20 years now working in the energy sector, looking at it from a place-based perspective, from back in the days where regional development agencies were concerned about the economic opportunities that might stem from the growth of the renewable energy industry, through to now where we're working really closely with government to understand the role of place in the energy system so that we can get good energy system planning and operation that benefits citizens and businesses across the UK. Part of the work that I've been doing recently has been very well informed by innovation projects. Obviously today we're here to talk about innovation, and the innovation projects that we've been involved in have been fundamental to giving us the evidence that we need to work out the proper role that places can play in the energy system. A recent piece of work we've done was called the Regional Energy Systems Operator Project. It was a Prospering from the Energy Revolution project that was funded by Innovate UK. And that's given us some really useful evidence. It's shown that there's a huge amount of value that could be captured, not just within the energy system, but for those, for the economy, for society, for people around the energy system as well. We identified £720 million of net present value that could be harnessed just in the West Midlands if place took a role in both planning and operating the energy system. So that's given us some really strong evidence, which we're working to feed into government and into Ofgem as they think about what our future energy system looks like. So hopefully that will give us a bit of evidence and a platform to talk about the role of place. And I think I'm joining a panel later on as well to talk about local energy. And again, we'll be exploring the role of place and local energy within the energy system as a whole. But today, the purpose of this session, as I say, is to talk about local air energy planning. And a number of panellists throughout the day have been mentioning the role of local air energy planning and how that might contribute to some of our objectives. So I'm delighted to introduce Guy Newey, who's the Chief Exec of the Energy Systems Catapult, who's kindly agreed to answer lots of our questions. So I don't know if any of you have got to grips with the Slido system yet, but if you have, do feel free to log on, ask any questions that you want me to pose to Guy later on. I will be coming to those as we get towards the end of the session. So today's about understanding the role of innovation and how we address the challenges. Local air energy planning is an innovation that Energy Systems Catapult have been at the forefront of for a number of years now. So I'd like to try and explore, to start with, how we can actually move from innovation to business as usual. So how do we take this and we make it something that influences what we do every day? So as you can imagine, from the West Midlands Combined Authority's perspective, our interest in local air energy planning is quite obvious, really. We're a place, so we're obviously going to be interested in how we can shape the energy system. But I'd like to start off, Guy, by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and explain why the Energy Systems Catapult thinks that place is important within the energy system.
Thanks, Cheryl. So what are the big challenges we're really grappling with? And at the Energy Systems Catapult, we're an innovation centre, so we think about definitely the hard stuff and try and work our way through some of these challenges and then work with companies, big and small, that are going to try and solve it. So what are the things that we as a country and internationally indeed are really struggling with at the moment? Right, so top of anyone's list is how you're going to decarbonise buildings, 24, 25 million domestic properties, another, probably up to 30 million buildings in total. We're really only at the kind of foothills of getting anywhere near that challenge. How are we going to build the infrastructure we need, particularly for the power grid of the future? It's probably going to be an electricity system, our modelling would say, twice the size of the current one we've got. So probably something like 600 terawatt hours up from 330 terawatt hours. But that's not going to work unless we've got the wires connecting it. And if we're being completely frank, I don't need to tell people at this conference, that's not going as quickly as it should be going. So that's one of the key challenges. And without that, we're going to have a lot of kind of stranded assets. Linked to that, because we've got to think about how we can do this in the most cost-effective way. We've got to think about the potential of flexibility, how we're going to unlock lots of the innovators we work with, harnessing digital technology and other new innovations, how they're going to provide services to the grid easily, etc. And when you come down to what unites, or what's the common area of all of those challenges, these are local challenges often, right? They are, the buildings are often very specific to the particular area. The grid is obviously different in different areas. And we don't tend to think about, when we thought about the energy system traditionally, we've talked about it as a national system, really, and without thinking particularly about the local areas. And because of the characteristics of different areas and the fact they are so different, our kind of view at the Energy Systems Catapult is if you don't take local seriously and you don't see local and places as kind of key enabler of the transition, then it's not going to happen. It's quite a stark way of putting it, but I really don't think, unless we're really thinking about what those transitions mean at a local level, practically, that it's going to happen. Definitely not on the pace and scale we need to have a chance of meeting our carbon budgets. And so what do you need in order to unlock the potential of those areas? You need planning, you need market designs, you need policy frameworks, you need to understand who's got which roles and responsibilities, you need to understand how it fits with network innovation and network price control processes. All of this stuff needs to work together. It is a proper whole systems problem if we're going to have a chance of doing it. And our view is without that kind of that policy framework in place and the action, one, it's not going to happen at the pace and scale you need. And one, you're going to stifle a load of great innovation, which could be reducing the cost and creating the jobs and growth that we need.
Very good points there already, Guy. We're obviously being encouraged to look at the energy system from a whole systems perspective.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that at a national level, that can seem quite daunting. It not only involves the electricity network and the gas network, but we're also talking about involving the built environment, the transport system, all of those customers who are connecting. And obviously this conference is trying to do that, is trying to bring all those innovators together. Can you explain a bit about why local area energy planning could play a really important role in bringing those different characters together at that sort of level?
Yeah, and this is a systems problem, right? Whole system, and there's no easier way to get people nodding at conferences like this, and you say, well, this is a whole system challenge, and everyone goes, yes, absolutely. And of course, everyone's got their own definition of exactly what the system means. To us at the Energy Systems Catapult, we say we've done quite a lot of thinking in there. It's really thinking about that full value chain, right from sources of generation through the pipes and wires, through the buildings, to those annoying things at the end of it, consumers, who are going to be absolutely essential to this. It's about thinking cross-vector, and all of you, and you see lots of companies who are kind of breaking down those traditional silos between the transport system and the heating system and the electricity system. You can buy your car from your electricity company. That's just a small example of it. But crucially, you've got to get all of these big systems working together. I'm a policy person. I worked in government for a few years. I always thought, if you get the policy right, you get the markets right, everything will be all right from there. But now I spend a lot more time with engineers. I'm told that the physics is quite important. And crucially, one of the big opportunities, and indeed the challenges, is we're landing a digital system on top of all of those systems. So unless you get the markets lined up, the planning system lined up, etc. So what's the role of local area energy planning in that system? Well, the first thing to say is it's not everything, right? This is not creating for the West Midlands or for Glasgow the absolute master plan where every single aspect of what's going to happen is planned forward. That would be really bad for consumer choice, it would be really bad for innovation, and it would create more of the problems, right? But it's trying to understand, and again, this is why the systems thinking is like, get the market design right so that you can incentivize the innovators to come in and produce the technologies and the consumer solutions that work. But to underpin that, you're going to have a set of energy infrastructure, monopoly infrastructure, whether it's heat networks or upgrades to the electricity system, etc. And it's a kind of missing part of the jigsaw at the moment. You know, we do, and local areas do, you know, it's one of their core capabilities is thinking about spatial planning in a particular area, but we don't do enough of thinking about how the energy system needs to migrate, and our kind of best view. And if you had an agreed view of what the monopoly infrastructure would be, that would allow you then, hopefully, to get some of the stuff you need built more quickly, which is one of the key challenges I set out at the start, and people in this room and at this conference are grappling with every day. But it would also allow you, if you do it properly, to build consent for the kind of changes you want. Because lots of areas have got very ambitious, some, I dare say, heroic climate targets and ambitions, but people on the ground, real people, are kind of only just starting on that journey and understanding what it means for their home, etc. And the planning system is a way of moving them through so you get a kind of agreed path for what you need to get to.
Absolutely. A lot of the engagement that we undertook when we were looking at this kind of thing showed us that we've got a big job to do to bring those people who don't normally engage with the energy system into some of that decision making and engage them with how the energy system plans now.
Yeah.
The transport planning system happens in its own way, the spatial planning system happens in its own way, the electricity and gas planning systems happen in their own way, none of which are aligned. We don't expect them to be aligned, they're never going to be. They're independent processes, but somehow we do have to get them working together. And hopefully local energy planning can bring some of that together. I mean, it's not the be-all and end-all, it's certainly not going to provide us with all the solutions we're looking for, but I think it will take us a long way.
And if you don't have it, you're going to end up spending more money than you probably need to, which is going to push the resistance to net zero transition, all of those elements.
Yeah, and if you don't have it, we also aren't going to see the investors knowing where to put their money, and that's a really important thing for us to try and get some investor confidence where people know what's going to happen where and try and reduce some of the risk. And I think that's the role for the public sector, is to try and support in that risk reduction process to help with the private sector to actually make those investments. So the Energy Systems Catapult's been a strong advocate of local energy planning to government and have provided lots of guidance to local authorities on how they can get started and what they can do. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey that government's been on this, both locally and nationally, and what still needs to be done?
Yeah, good question. And I've got probably got a bit of confession. I'm not sure this is the right environment to do confessions, but why not? So
we are broadcasting, just so you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, it's not. You know, I've been at Energy Systems Catapult for 3 or 4 years, but before that, I was in government 3 or 4 years, and I look back on lots of things that you could have done differently. Of course you do. But probably one of the areas which I regret the most is that weren't pushing, thinking about the role of the balance between the national and the local systems enough, right? It was, and that's partly because we weren't really thinking about buildings as much as we should. We weren't really thinking about networks. The stuff that actually are bubbling under as the huge challenges now, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, it was all about, you know, can we keep the offshore wind industry going, et cetera, right? So the challenges are new, but I really wish I'd kind of helped push the other side, but I probably had a perception in my head that when we thought about local energy, we thought about community energy, and those are not the same things. There's a role for community energy in local energy, but this is about the right granularity to address the problem. So that confession off my chest now. Where do I think government is on this? Well, first of all, I'd say it's moved a huge amount of distance in the last 3 or 4 years. So when they did the clean growth strategy. No, net zero strategy, sorry, clean growth strategy was the last one. Net zero strategy, you know, there was a section on local, and there was kind of, you know, some institutional arrangements set up, working groups, forums, etc. It's a start, and lots of, you know, the people in this room and elsewhere who've been agitating for that, whether it's, you know, Merlin at Regen or CSE or us at Energy Systems Catapult, you know, this has been a long journey for lots of people, and that felt like a big step forward, you know, getting a, you know, and you see signs that they are moving. But really, it's one of the big strategic questions I don't think the government has grappled with yet, is role of national versus role of local. And, you know, you also have, in addition to BEIS, you have the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. That was barely paying any attention to net zero until, frankly, about 2 years ago. You know, have the same old meeting with the same old official every 6 months, and say, and he'd say, oh yeah, no, it's all moving, and you'd like, really? You know, there's more energy around that. There's more opportunity, I think, around that. So things are moving in directions. We are nowhere near the policy frameworks, how it joins up with Ofgem, what the guidance should be, etc. And because of some of the work that Innovate UK funded and BEIS have started funding, we're putting in some of the building blocks suggestions and, you know, think about the innovation opportunities there. But it's still a long way to go. And there is still institutional resistance to the idea that local generally should be there for anything apart from putting the bins out. I caricature it a bit, but there's kind of, we can't trust any of those people in local areas to do that. And I spend a lot of time thinking about innovation policy. That's another one where in West Midlands we're desperate to have more control over that. We are a very centralised country, and so you know, our battle on the role of local is just part of a wider battle about the role of subnational kind of bodies in policy. But where we are seeing activity in Wales, you know, all 22 local authorities in Wales are now working through local area energy plans. We are seeing, you know, different local authorities trying different things in different ways. It is a real area of excitement and innovation going on. And none of that was happening, or was happening on quite a small scale, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. So we're on there, we're on that innovation journey. It's messy, but, you know, fingers crossed we'll keep that momentum going.
I absolutely agree. We're in the process of negotiating a devolution deal with central government, and that's been a really interesting process. Net zero wasn't on the list when we were invited to speak about it. It's most definitely on the list now. We are starting to see devolution deals come out for combined authorities that do mention net zero and are quite explicit about what those opportunities are. It wasn't on the list, no. So yeah, it takes a while. It does take a while. But also, it's great to see that Ofgem are starting to look at local governance and the role that local can play within the energy system as a whole, because they're the ones that regulate. And for the network operators who are in the audience, you know, they're governed by Ofgem and the decisions that they take. So the fact that there's some work going on there is also kind of encouraging, but it shows that it's still in its infancy. It's still at that early stage of innovation rather than business as usual, which is the key thing we need to get to. Now, obviously, this conference is for network operators. That's where it started. And they're probably sitting here thinking, well, that's nice. I don't really care about what government's doing. I've got an energy system to manage and run, and certainly wouldn't put it in the hands of any local people. That would be a disaster. But how can we start to embed the concept of local energy planning into the work of our network operators, into those companies, to make this business as usual? And realistically, how's it going to be paid for? Yeah. Because it's going to involve a lot of people and a lot of money.
So the first thing to say is there's already a lot happening, right? You know, networks have actually been some of the most forward-thinking about this area because they are, you know, particularly at the kind of DNO or regional gas operator, they're operating in local areas, right? So they understand the challenges, they've got the planning challenges they're working through, and they're in this kind of endless cat and mouse game with Ofgem about what they can do going forward. And having something which was the agreed view for an area of what needs to happen could be a great enabler. And you've seen some of them, and probably some of the people in this room, if I could see anything beyond the first two rows because of these lights, I'd recognise people who are working through what that means in practice. And Ofgem, you know, in the latest guidance have had a really, you know, an important lean towards it. It's not quite as hard-edged a requirement, etc. But that means some real difficult policy choices about who has responsibility for what, who pays for what, etc. And to your question about, you know, who should pay for local area energy plans? Well, there's only two real options. There's either local authorities pay for it. Potential upside of that is totally independent, democratic mandate, etc. Downsides of that are, do they have any money? How does it stack up against other requirements? All of that. Or you get the networks to pay, you know, then you're into questions of independence. How do you balance between electricity and gas systems, etc. These are tricky policy problems that need to be worked through. They are not insurmountable, right?
No.
First question is, strategically, do you think local areas are important for the transition? Then you work out what the policy detail is underneath in terms of what the roles and responsibilities are. How do you ensure independence? You know, the planning system is full of little anomalies where we've worked through this. Generally, energy planning shouldn't be any different. So it needs to be worked through. I'm kind of, you know, reasonably relaxed about who ends up footing the bill, as long as it happens, and it happens in a consistent and impressive way. Consistent and robust way, and impressive. Not going to be impressive, but robust was the word I was
I definitely think we need some decisions.
Yeah.
That would be quite helpful. And as you say, regulation can encourage that collaboration that's needed, so there is a mechanism to achieve that. I'd like to start trying to take some questions from the floor.
Great.
So I will have a look through Slido and see what we've got. There are a few people who've put their name to questions, so I'm likely to come to you guys because you're brave enough to put your name down. But I probably ought to go for the most popular one first. So I have got a question here. Do we need to upskill local authorities so that they can make effective energy system decisions? There's a question about whether they currently have the expertise they need in every area of the UK.
Yes. No, absolutely, right? And what we've found of our kind of years of working with this, and others would have felt the same, there's a huge variety between different local authorities and local government in terms of capability, right? We've got some places which are real trailblazers in local energy more broadly, and some of them with local area energy planning, you know, Manchester and Bristol, and obviously the West Midlands is pushing hard in this area. You know, there's some that are really moving fast in this area. Some of the work that we're really engaged in is how do you think about that that longer tail? You know, this is classic early adopter, but it's instead of being kind of technology adopters, consumer adopters, it's local authority adopters. How do you make it really easy for that second and third group coming forward before you start worrying about the people who don't want to do anything? But you know, we can worry about those later. What do they need? Well, they need support in terms of, you know, expertise on how you might do plans or other areas of local energy. That's why the hubs are such an important innovation, and you know, fingers crossed they continue to get the support going forward. That looks like that's been a really good innovation going forward. You need tools that make it really easy for people to move forward with projects. And another thing that we at the Catapult have started doing, which tries to fill in some of that gap, is launched the platform Net Zero Go, which is about helping local authorities and others, you know, work their way through projects more easily and crucially learn from others and others' mistakes. Now that doesn't negate the fact that you still need, you know, energy teams, sustainability teams who can kind of do that, but you make their life easier, and you don't, you know, you try and make that process more efficient. So it's kind of again, it's part of that, all the building blocks from the kind of local area energy planning master plan, identification of projects, the work on Net Zero Go, so you can identify which projects need to happen, right through to then the financing. How do you navigate the kind of alphabet soup of different funding pots, which some 12-year-old in the Treasury is ultimately going to decide whether you're allowed to do or not, etc. You know, those are all the things that we need, those building blocks to put in place, which then gives confidence to the policymakers to say, actually, this can then happen. again, you've got to join it up with network processes as well.
Yeah, one of the things I always say is that local authorities won't have the skills and expertise unless they have the responsibility, because they're not going to pay for something they don't need.
Exactly.
So the skills do exist out there in the market. They're just not currently employed by many of the local authorities because they don't have the responsibility to do that.
Yeah,
and it requires innovation to do that at the moment.
Exactly.
Which is, those few of us who are doing innovation are the ones who are kind of focusing on it. As an organisation, Energy Capital is not core funded by our local authorities to do everything that we do. A lot of that is innovation funded. That's how we do it.
Yeah, and local authorities stacking up something it's not required to do
when
versus
they've got a lot of things that they
children's
have to
services,
do. Absolutely.
special education, all of the kind of picking up the bins, all of that stuff which is mandated, etc.
Yep.
So, again, it's got to get on that statutory footing is our view.
So I've got another question here, which is probably more relevant to our network colleagues. So one of the problems faced by local areas is getting appropriate data from electricity and gas companies and network operators. How can we improve this to allow whole system activity? Yeah,
it's a pretty essential backbone of us being able to do this. One of the things that we, Energy Systems Catapult, were hugely involved with was Energy Data Task Force and the Energy Digitalisation Task Force, which Laura Sands, one of our NEDs, chaired. I would say a lot has happened since that started. I mean, again, little memories of when I was in central government and Michael Grubb, who was chair of the body that was meant to basically say whether the capacity mechanism recommendation that National Grid had made to us was sound. So it's a kind of check there. And he was banging his head against the wall saying, I can't get any data about what's happening locally. And I was sat there as an advisor at that point thinking, hold on a sec. So we're worried about security of supply and we can't get any information about what's actually happening and what are the constraints going on, etc. And I think the whole Energy Data Task Force process really got the government, Ofgem, and crucially the industry on a journey further forward. I'm not close enough to the detail to know how well it's being implemented, but more and more positive signs I see, which is encouraging more innovation, which is allowing the kind of flexibility services and others to come forward. It's a hell of a long journey, but we are, again, miles better than where we were 4 or 5 years ago. And the industry should congratulate itself on that. But again, at some point, it's going to probably need a hard regulatory requirement for people to just say, no, this needs to happen.
Thank you. I'm probably going to start to draw to a close now because I can tell we could probably have this conversation for quite a long time. But thank you, that's been really useful. There's been a couple of questions about local energy and the role of REMA and other things like that, which I might suggest we hold for the next panel, because we could hear quite a few different people's opinions on that. So I will finish there and say thank you very much, Guy, and I look forward to joining everybody on the next session.